Boker Tov, guys. We are recording. So we began our morning session yesterday. We started a little bit with the LeYisrael. So today we're going to go back a little bit just to explain what is this LeYisrael. We gave a little bit of a brief yesterday. I'm going to go into it a little bit further, so you guys have a little bit of an understanding of what this sefer is. It was put together by Rav Haim Vital, one of the students of the LeYisrael. He's the author of Shara Kavanot. He put this together for every individual to have a daily kivyut study of Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, Mishnayot, Gemara, Halacha, Zohar, Musar. Now, originally, he didn't include the Halacha and the Musar. If you notice, at the end of each day, they'll have a Halacha and Musar, which we didn't do yesterday. It says Yosef Lechok. Why does it say Yosef Lechok? Because this was added by the Chidah. The Chidah, his name was Rabbeinu Haim Yosef David Azulai. So he called it Yosef Lechok. Yosef means like to add. So he took his name to add Yosef Lechok, and he added Halacha and Musar to it. So Rav Chaim Vital actually didn't include these two. This was added subsequently later to all the LeYisraels, and everybody accepted it. It was just the Haidah. What's interesting about the Haidah, I remember asking Rav Nisim Abadi Alav Shalom this question from Israel. I always asked him, I'm like, I've read a lot of halachot in Shulchan Aruch that we don't do. Like, there's a lot of halachot, if you read in Shulchan Aruch, we completely don't do them. And some of them, most of them are stringencies, some even leniencies. But I asked him, I said to him, why is it that this occurs? I'll give you just one really brief example, or two. One of them is, let's say, Netilat Yadayim. According to Shulchan Aruch, you would say the beracha and then wash your hands. We don't. We wash our hands, then we say the beracha. I'll give you another one. Shulchan Aruch says to wear your tzitzit above your garments, not below your garments. Now, according to the Kabbalah, we wear it below the garments. But my question to Rav Nisim Abadi, Alav Shalom, was, is there a system that I could look at the Shulchan Aruch and know we're not following this halacha? Or like, what is it? So Rav Musafi commented on this question, and he said that everybody can follow Shulchan Aruch, which means, let's say there's an individual who doesn't know any better. He just opened up Shulchan Aruch and he just followed it. Rav Musafi stated, you can't correct anyone for not following Shulchan Aruch, because Shulchan Aruch was the only halacha sefer that was accepted by every single a part of the Jewish nation. Sfaradim, Ashkenazim, Hasidim, maybe today even the Temanim in Israel, because Temanim always followed Harambam before. So he said that you can't correct someone, but he said, how would you know the difference in Kabbalah stuff? He said you would know it from the Haidah. The Haidah, what he did is he clarified where we would follow the Halacha, the Shulchan Aruch, where we would follow the Kabbalah. So really, in essence, Sfaradim really follow a lot of the Haidah. People aren't well aware is that, for the most part, many Sfaradim follow the Haidah. Because if you were to look in reference to the Shulchan Aruch, you'll see a lot of stuff there that is just not being done. I always wanted to devote more time to actually listing from the Halachot and Shulchan Aruch all the ones that people don't do. There's a bunch of them. Like, I'll show you one that I recently found that stated that when a Kala is coming down the aisle, it's asur to look at her. You know, a man's not allowed to look at the bride coming down. That's Shulchan Aruch Meforash. I saw it the other day. We'll reference this back when we go into it, which is awkward. Like, I mean, I shouldn't say it's awkward. It's not done, so it sounds awkward because you don't see this. But when you look at the halacha, and you see that they were pretty clear. She's going to get married to this guy. Everyone shouldn't be looking at her.
The Khatan shouldn't look at her?
No, the Khatan has to look at her. The other people. Now you have 300 men watching a woman walk down the aisle. I mean, I don't know where did Siniyud go here? I don't know. It went out of the window over here. So the Shulchan Aruch says it's asur to look at her. Yeah, asur to look at her. No, the husband has to look at her. He can't get married to her if he doesn't know she.
When I said I see that few, I thought the Khatan, because usually the Khatan is not like really looking.
He should be looking.
Yeah.
He's the only one who should be looking.
He's like,
and if there's anything we learned from Yaakov and Lavan, his father-in-law.
Make sure.
You better look, double check if there's anything we learned from Lavana Arami. Uh, it's funny, I always wondered why was Lavan Arami zoche to have four daughters. He had four daughters. Two of them is Rachel and Leah from one wife. Then he has another wife, Bilega. She gets Bilha. He has Bilha and Zilpah. So he has a total of four wives, four daughters from two wives, and they all become, in a sense, imahot. And you think this guy Lavan, you look in the Torah, he's a gangster. He's the biggest gangster, and he's not shy about it. He's clear. He's out for people's money. He's out to steal. He's tricking people, and people know him that way. And I didn't find the mefaresh on this, but I thought a lot about it. And because you do see this in the Torah, though, is that why was God so favorable to Lavan to give him this? And we can't say it was just that it was Avraham Avinu's family, because Avraham Avinu had a larger family than just Betuel and Lavan. But why choose this guy? And I saw something really, really interesting. One of them is that Lavan was a big Ovid Avodah Zarah. He loved idolatry. And we've spoken about in the past how idolatry of like what we say today is not what it was back then. Back then it was like a technology. What I mean like a technology is like if a guy's with his phone in the street and you ask him, how high is that building? He knows. Or what's the weather going to be like next week? He knows. That's kind of like what Avodah Zarah was. It was a form of something where they used astrology, astronomy, being able to look into the future, knowing things, and by using this, they were able to gather a lot of information. Now Lavan, even though he was a big Avodah Zarah, he had one good thing going for him. What was that one thing? It's crazy what I'm going to tell you right now. He was an honest guy. And I don't mean honest in the sense that he dealt honestly in business, but he wasn't a two-faced person. He wasn't what they called echad bapeh ve'echad balev, something that God is soneh. God hates it when a person outwardly is showing favor, but inwardly he's hateful. And it's something that's very common. It's so common today that, you ever wonder why so many people give berachot and they don't come true? You ever wonder that? You ever wonder why guy all day is getting berachot, none of them come true? He goes to one gadol, he tells him 3 words, or like Rav Haim Kanievsky, buha, and suddenly the guy has all the beracha. Because people don't realize that the kavanah and the feeling and truthfulness of a person being truthful and saying a real beracha one time is enough to get a person answered. But more so than not, we're blessing just like that. We're not even caring. And people today have gotten to the point where it doesn't. The echad bapeh, echad balev is a real problem. They say things they don't mean. They mean things they don't say, and it causes a constant issue. So this thing about Lavan is that he was honest. He was honest with everyone. He was going to be a thief. He was going to steal from everybody. He didn't care, and of course that's not a good thing. But God said, your honesty is very, very important because we live in a world, even back then, that most people don't say the truth. If they don't like someone, they make the guy feel like they like him. And that alone bothers God very much because with that, there could never be improvement. You see, a person who's outwardly honest in how he is and how he's acting, he has potential to change because he's there. He's real to who he is. And so you can adjust it. Okay, you got to fix this. You got to adjust that. Don't do this. Stop doing that. Learn Musad. Fine. But a guy who's fake, that's a much bigger issue. And Lavan, at least he was an honest person to the extent that he wasn't untruthful to himself. And it seems God might have appreciated that so much that he said, okay, the Avodah Zarah stuff we could get rid of as they went away with the daughters. And now you have truly honest, pure imahot, which is unbelievable. We see this a lot. You see this a lot throughout the Tanakh and different things. So back to the Chok LeYisrael, written by Haim Vital, name of the Arizal. And he writes there, Sedek esek haTorah she'ha'adam hayav likro b'chol yom b'kviut. You have to do this every single day. Besod kiviat itim laTorah. One of the questions that they're going to ask is Kavata Itim La Torah. We're going to talk about the questions that they're going to ask. The end of life, the 120 years, there's a couple of questions they're going to ask the Bedin Shel Mala. Besides that, they're going to review everybody's actions in life. They're going to ask him specific questions. It's an open book test. We know already the questions. One of them is Kavata Itim La Torah. Did you set time up every day for learning? What we're doing here, we're coming every morning to learn, in the evening to learn. That's Kavata Itim. To God, Kiviut Itim is more than just learning Torah. Meaning a guy who's randomly learning every day for an hour, random times. Just 10 minutes in the morning, 10 in the afternoon, 10 there. It's not Kiviut Torah. But if he learns for 3.5 minutes every night before he goes to sleep, one Mishnah, that's Kiviut. God wants to see Kiviut because the Kiviut, that little steadfastness, consistently allows a lot more growth than just the randomness of doing tasks. And this is what the Kollel was trying to do. So he divided up a little bit with Mikra, a little bit with Mishnah, a little bit Talmud. You asked yesterday about who wrote the Targum in the Nevi'im and Ketubim. It's a Gemara that we'll go into in the future, but it was Yonatan ben Uziel. That was the one who did it. It's not Rabbi Yonatan ben Uziel, just Yonatan ben Uziel. He didn't have the word Rabbi next to him in the Gemara. Just the first name basis. Usually, if the Gemara references a person by first name basis, that means he was on a very high level.
He was
on a very high level. Very high level. Usually, when there's a lot of titles to an individual, it brings the individual down because you need to give titles to give credence to him. Some people reach the point, he's just him. Moshe was just Moshe. Aharon was Aharon. Miriam was Miriam. You understand? Today, unfortunately, we're so far from this. Today, it's tons of titles. This 6, 7 titles before, or 4 of them after. But back in the day, it was or even the old rabbis in the old countries, what they call them? They call him Hacham. Just Hacham. They said on Rabbeinu Yosef Haim, the Baal of the Ben Ish Hai, that he was known in the town as Il Hacham. They didn't even say his name. They say the Hacham, the wise one. Hacham, Gimatria, is also Haim. You take the word Hacham, and that was one of the words. It's funny because his name was Rabbeinu Yosef Haim. They called him Il Hacham, so that was interesting. And so that's Yonatan ben Uziel. Okay, so let's continue. He says here, what I found interesting is that besides that Sfaradim do this, and this has become a text that's reviewed by Rashi Yeshivot, and Gedolim, along with business people. This was actually accepted by the Hasidim really, really well. I'll show you. It says here that Rav Elimelech Melizinsk studied from it. Rav Levi Yitzchak Mibardichav, Rav Yechzkel Shraga Mesineva, Rav Yoel from Satmar, Rav Yehoshua Mibelz, the Admors of Kurlin, Chernobyl, Vizhnitz, and even the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch says, "Misha eno yachol la'asot torato keva." Let's say a guy he can't be able to focus. אלא הוא שהוא קובע עיתים לתורה מישהו שיש לו חוק קבוע ולא יעבור ללמוד בספר חוק לישראל דבר יום ביומו. So what they tell people is, if you're not a guy who can sit and learn and do a lot of stuff on a consistent basis, just take this one Chok LeYisrael. You could take this one to the grave. This is one of those books that if you had one set to take with you, this is one of those great books that you would really do a lot of good for yourself. So how does he divide the Pesukim? So there's Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. On Shabbat, you don't read Chok LeYisrael. On Yom Tov, you don't read Chok LeYisrael. I believe on Chol HaMoed also, you don't read Chok LeYisrael. So it's only written on Yemei Chol. So the first day of the week, he says here, Shisha, okay, Bimei Rishon. So you read 6 Pesukim on the first and on the 4th day. You read 4 on the 2nd day and 5 on the 3rd and the 5th day. What he's saying is that every day you have a few Pesukim that you read. Some days you'll read 6 Pesukim, some you'll read 4, some you'll read 5.
It's not the whole Parsha.
No, so what happens?
Taking bits of the Parsha?
Yeah, so you're going to do 26 Pesukim until Thursday, okay? Then on Thursday night, there's a reading that you could do that they have in here, Pesukim. And then on Friday, there's some more. But on Friday, you review the whole parasha again.
Yeah,
So you do Shnai Michal Echad Targum on the whole parasha. So you'll do the 26 Pesukim, Keneged Yud Kei Vav Kei 26, and then on Friday you're going to review the whole things, the whole thing again. It says here, ביום שישי מסיימים את כל פסוקי הפרשה מתחילתה ועד סופה. Next thing, the Nevi'im part that is in the Kollel is usually going to be from the Haftarah, almost always. Sometimes it'll include Pesukim before or after. The Ketubim that's in here is going to be the entire book of Mishlei. From beginning to end, we're going to finish the entire book, and there's going to be a little bit of Tehillim. We're going to bump into some Tehillim. Usually, now at the end, Be'alotecha, Tezot Beracha, you'll see a little bit from Sefer Tehillim. So that's the only Ketubim book, Mishlei and Tehillim. The Mishnah is divided 6 days by the 6 Sedarim. Remember, I told you the Mishnah is called Zman Nakat. Zera'im, Mo'ed, Nashim, Nezikim, Mo'ed, Taharot, 6 days. So it's organized. Sunday would be Zera'im, and then go forward from there. When it comes to the Gemara, they usually will do the Gemara that's connected to the Mishnah of the day, as we'll see when we go into it. And Seder Zera'im, the first one, where there's no Talmud Bavli, they'll take from Masechet Berachot. Some of the Sedarim only have Mishnayot, no Gemara Bavli. So in those cases, let's say on Sunday, they would take from Masechet Berachot. The Kabbalah part of the learning is on the Zohar, almost entirely from the Zohar. And then you have Musar from different random books that the Chida brought in. The Chida put in the Musar and the Halacha. Then at the end of it on Friday, you'll see in the Kollel LeYisrael they have at the end Mitzvot Hashem, which is all the mitzvot of the Torah, of the parasha. So you can go through the end of the parasha, you can see all the mitzvot. It's one of my favorite parts of the whole parasha because you see a lot of he'arot when you look at the mitzvot. I can tell you one thing. I've read like 3 or 4 books only on Sefer HaMitzvot, just like reading. And there's like maybe, I think there's 10 books that wrote on the 613 mitzvot, and they don't agree with each other, which is very, very interesting.
On what they are?
On what they are. Everyone agrees because it's a meforash Gemara that it has 613 mitzvot, plus 7 of the Rabbanan. The 613 is not, there's no unanimous decision that this is it. It's something unbelievable because we use many times Harambam or the Sefer HaChinuch. There's the Samach, there's Samag, Sefer Mitzvot Katan, Gadol. There's different ones. But what I found to be the most interesting is that they don't all agree. There's some Hachamim will tell you that's not a mitzvah from the Torah. The other one will tell you no, that's a mitzvah deoraita. So they all argue, but they all agree at 613. And this follows Sefer Mitzvot Hashem. The first copy of the Kollel LeYisrael was not printed a long time ago. It was printed in 1740 in Mitzrayim. I found a copy. You can kind of see it here. This was the Shara Sefer, the Madora Rishona in Mitzrayim, Shenat Hey Taf Kuf. So you can kind of see it right there. That's the first one cover of it. And it's interesting. The printing press is really, really important. Why is the printing press important? There were many halacha books that were printed in our times. Harambam printed a colossal work, Yad HaChazakah. They called him HaNesher HaGadol. The Nesher, we say is an eagle, but really, when I went to the museum in Borough Park, it was a Jewish museum of artifacts. I spoke with Rabbi Deutsch about this. He said it's absolutely not an eagle. He goes, it was commonly missaid that eagles are neshed. He said it's actually the vulture. He said the family of the eagle. He said, but there's a unique species of the vulture, and that is what the neshed. Why is that important? We called Harambam HaNeshed HaGadol. He was not just an eagle; he was a vulture. Harambam was not afraid to be clear and concise, and he did something no one else did. But his book wasn't accepted as halacha on Klal Yisrael. The Shulchan Aruch was. What's interesting about the Shulchan Aruch is one thing that Rabbi Yosef Karo did is that he used the printing press to his advantage. because when he came out with the books, he just had escaped Spain. He was a young boy. He was orphaned um, by his father, Rabbeinu Ephraim. He had traveled with his sister, and he went to Saloniki, he went to Italy. He finally got to Israel. When he got older, he produced his book. He took advantage of the printing press, and he said that this is going to get this book out of here, get out quickly. Why is that important? When you know that part of history, then you take that to your advantage, because today the printing press is probably video communication and email communication, or online communication, social media, however it is that people are using today. But besides the printing, we always keep the printing. We're never going to take away printing. Printing in books is always going to be a Jewish thing. We're the people of the books. So we're always going to have hard copies. But using the mediums is very, very important, because we see that those in our Jewish history that went out and used the mediums were successful in getting their Torah out. So that's that. Now, I mentioned that Rav Chaim Vital learned it from the Arizal, the system, and also another rabbi, Rabbi Yitzchak ben Baruch. He's another rabbi that was with it. Yeah.
When we said print in 1740, what was written well before that?
It was so. Rav Chaim Vital was before that. Rav Chaim Vital was in the 1500s. It's about 200 years off. In the 1740s, that's probably after maybe the Chida added in. Why was it 200 years? I don't know. You're right. It's about 200 years from the printing press. The printing press is about 1550. That was the Gutenberg printing press. Jews were not really allowed to print too much. Daniel Bomberg, who was in Venice at the time and had a printing press, was a Christian who had started printing the Talmud. There's a great podcast on 1840, the number 18 and then 40 spelled out, about the daf, how the daf was established, who established it, who set up what needs to go there. It was mostly Jews who worked for Daniel Bomberg, the Christian, who designed it and put it together. Now, Daniel Bomberg, we owe him a lot of credit for printing, because the Jewish people were not allowed to print a lot of text. And the church and the Pope were not so fond of printing Jewish works. But when a Christian said he wanted to do it, they didn't feel that threatened. Well, it wasn't that big of a deal. So they let him do it. Now, unfortunately, the Jews that worked for Daniel Bomberg, when they ended up printing the press, many of them converted and became Christians. That was like a little side fact note, which is unfortunate that happened. But we owe him a lot of credit. Daniel Bomberg printed a lot of the Sfarim that we have till today. Now, Daniel Bomberg was no expert in Gemara. Many of the Gemara texts that he had were handwritten. So there was a family in Italy at the time called the Soncino family. The Soncino, that today we say Soncino, but the Soncino family, which had been producing books and Chumashim till I was a child in the 90s, 80s and 90s. They were already still printing their Chumashim and stuff in English. What was unbelievable is that the Soncino family had all the text organized, not Daniel Bomberg. Bomberg had the printing press and had the approval to print, but Bomberg was no Talmudist. He didn't know which Gemariot were right. You know, if I were to give you Latin texts and you were to see it, you can kind of put together where the book is going to go based on certain things, but you wouldn't know if the text was accurate. So Soncino family actually worked on taking all the handwritten text, fixing up duplicates, removing this, that, organizing all the Gemariot. Bomberg took a lot of their work and didn't give credit to the Soncino family, and he ended up printing all the Gemariot. So it's really interesting. And if you know, before 1500, there were no dapim. That's why if you look in Rashi and Tosafot, a lot of times they never mention dapim. The dapim that are always mentioned are always in parentheses. Why? Because they had no dapim. How did they refer to Gemariot? By Masechet and by Perek. So let's say they'll tell you Arve Pesachim, Sof Arve Pesachim. They never mentioned a daf that they would go to. That's all new stuff. The funny thing is, when Eliyahu Navi Zachur Latov is going to come, and there's going to be Hayat Emetim, and we're going to meet the Rashi HaKadosh and the Tosafot, and we're going to tell them, hey, on Masechet Kiddushin, Daf Pei Daled, or Daf Mem, or whatever, and whatever Daf there is, it says this, and they're going to be like, what? They're like, what are we talking about? Yeah, Daf this. I don't know what you're talking about. There's no Daf. What do you mean? What Gemara? Sachin? Okay. Babli or Yerushalmi? I was going to ask you that. Babli or Yerushalmi, because it's two. Okay. Tell you which Perek? Yeah. Okay. What's the Mishnah? What's the question?
You're going to remember it from the actual content.
The content. They're not going to measure from the daf. What daf? There was no daf. In this whole thing, we're memorizing dafs today, for the form of searching this stuff, but that didn't exist. It's just interesting because a lot of what we have today is so different than what was before just 500 years ago.
But that's even more, because you think about the Kollel of these rabbis, they didn't have structure that we had, and they still somehow made it into every single commentary book.
So I'm going to give you something interesting, Lior. That's actually why they succeeded, because there wasn't noise. There's too much noise today. There's way too much noise between all the technology and work, family stuff, our society today, books, printing, newsletters. There's so much noise. It says on the rugged shaver, Rav Yosef Rosen, that he had a very small library. He didn't have a big library. He had in there the Talmud Bavli, Yerushalmi, Harambam, Shulchan Aruch. He had a Tanakh. He had basics. He didn't have a big library, and he made that a point, the rugged shaver, Rav Yosef Rosen, to show people, because he was a genius, that you don't need a lot of books to be intelligent. You just need to learn the books. And that has always been the curriculum that I've tried to focus on, is always Rishonim. Always when you focus on the Rishonim, everything else comes smooth. When you know the core stuff. I found something interesting. I was researching a few things yesterday on Shar HaMitzvot. I bumped into some Parashat Ekev. Something interesting. I bumped into it. I thought it would be really, really nice. So let me know what you think. וכתב הרב המחבר ז"ל, פעם אחת אירע לי ביום שבת כאב גדול בעיניים. One time on Shabbat he had pain in his eyes. And it's talking about this. Rav Haim Vital is saying this. ונמשך הכאב זה קרוב לבית חודשים. For 2 months he had eye pain starting from Shabbat. ולא היה בתוכם שום חולי. But they checked it. The doctor checked it. There was nothing wrong. זולתי כאב העיניים, just a pain in the eyes. לא עלינו. לי מאוד. ושאלתי למורי ז"ל, he asked his rabbi, the Arizal. See, back in the day, when someone didn't feel well, he asked his rabbi. And that's the right thing to do. Because no one will ever have anything in his life unless there's something spiritual. Everything spiritual is tied to something physical. Everything. So when a person does a mitzvah, he's providing physical beracha in the world. I don't know where or to what, but it's physical beracha. Okay, so he asks his rabbi, Mahaya sibat ha'ke'evahu. What was the reason for that pain in his eyes? Ve'amar li bet sibot ha'echad hi lefi she'ani posea pesi'a gasa. He said, one, you know why you had pain in your eyes? Not you, but why he had pain in his eyes? Because you take big steps. And when you take big steps, it causes a certain loss of eyesight. When you walk during the week in big steps, strides, I don't know how big the strides are. Yeah, Shar Mitzvot is bringing down again. One of 500 of the vision of the eyes. Don't say from the vision of the eyes. It says enav, from the light of his eyes. Shel Adam. It only comes back on the Kiddush Leil Shabbat. So when a person says on Leil Shabbat, and then he looks at the reflection in the cup, by looking at his reflection in the cup, he returns to his eyes any things that were lost. Another thing that you look, why do you look at the reflection in the cup? Another one is that a forehead is called in Hebrew metzach, right? And then if your person wants haslacha, haslacha is what's up, Sharon? Haslacha is also gematria metzach. So when a person looks at his forehead in the yayin, which is gematria 70 secret sod. So when he's looking at the grape juice, at the wine, should be wine, and the reflection of his forehead. He's thinking the secret of success and getting back his eyesight. לפי שבאותו ליל שבת לא כוונתי באותו הקידוש, he says, that Shabbat, you didn't have kavanah on Kiddush, you didn't look at the reflection. I don't know, maybe you got busy or something, you didn't look at the reflection. לכן בא לי הכאב הזה, לא עלינו. He said, that's why the pain came. You didn't. So what he's saying here is that during the week, if a person's doing things that could hurt his vision, me'or enav, if he looks at the reflection of the cup, he's going to get it back. But he said by not doing it, it seemingly carried itself for 2 months afterwards. Siba bet, he said, what's the second reason? I was always praying in the Arizal's Beit Midrash. He said, I used to sit next to him, le'olam. I used to look at the rabbi, like gaze. Exactly, that's the right word. Gaze. Like he would not only look, but look would be like look and just continue. But he would he's focusing, he was gazing, because he wanted to learn everything from the Arizal. Remember, he was only with the Arizal for 20 months. He wanted to take everything in. He didn't want to. You have to understand. There's times that you're going to meet real Talmidei Chachamim in your life, and you're going to feel it, and you're going to want to be with them. Just as a side note, I've invited last year about maybe 25 rabbis here to Miami. I got a great time to spend probably every other 2 weeks or so. Every other week we had different rabbis come down, some New York, New Jersey, a couple from Israel, Queens, and I love taking the rabbis because you learn so much being with them. Besides learning from them, how they act, how they think, you learn personal things about them. You get a better insight of how the Torah is being taught to Klal Yisrael in general. I remember we took this one rabbi, Rabbi Yitzhak Levi. He's the chief rabbi of Nesher in Israel. He's coming back again after Sukkot. I was in touch with him just the other day, and I didn't tell him where he was going. You see, a lot of times I'll give some of the rabbis curriculum and schedule. I'll tell them, okay, we're speaking here, it's before Sukkot, prepare yourself. Or we're speaking with Ramim Noraim, this is the subject. Sometimes I bring the rabbis in the middle of Heshvan. He's not talking about Hanukkah. He's not talking about, he might talk about the parasha, he's not talking about upcoming holidays. What's he talking about? So I took this rabbi, Rabbi Yitzhak Levi, Hashem Yishmereu B'Hayeu. I took him to about 16 places in the course of a couple of days. And I asked him, Rabbi, is it okay? I'm going to take you a lot of places. No problem. And he speaks only in Hebrew. And we didn't want to do we did a translator, I think, only in Safra, Aventura. We did it, Rabbi Galamidi translated. But for the most part, I wanted to go to Israeli places because you'd be able to speak his heart and let it out. It's a very big difference when an Israeli rabbi speaks in English, then he speaks from his heart in Hebrew. I took him to 16 places, and I didn't tell him what the subjects were. So when we got to each shul, I would just whisper in his ear. I'm like, they're learning Hilchot Nida, Siman this. Okay. And he would get up for an hour and talk about it. Then I would tell him, okay, here, we're going here. They want to on Parashat Noah. Okay. 45 minutes, Parashat Noah. I did it 16 times. I didn't tell him where we were going and what we were speaking about. He knocked it out of the park every time. I have them all recorded on video. It's all on shul.com. I met him. I saw this. It changed my life. He's and we have a good friend, David Melamed, Hashem Yishmereu B'Hayeu. He told me 2 words on this rabbi, and he was right. He says, K'ma'ayan hamitkaber. He's like a wellspring of water that no matter how much, and he's the opener of Rabbi Yitzhak Yosef in Israel, the chief rabbi. He does a lot of the opening. So we were able to. Now, when you meet a rabbi like that, I looked at him a lot and I gazed at him a lot of times because I was like, wow, this is unbelievable. He wrote a few Sfarim, Avi Ezri, and things like that. He gave me, and I'm studying them now. But, and Maharchu, Rav Haim Vital, he saw the Arizal. He was shocked. He literally saw Malach living on planet Earth, and that was Toho Kevaro, the way he acted, the way he dressed, unbelievable. So he always would look at me, but he said that caused him a problem. I looked at him to look. But he, the Arizal, was praying while he was looking, and he was having kavanot gedolot v'nerot. Asher ad yadam haya or elyon shora alav. He had almost a physical light that was visible on him. ולא הייתי כדאי אז להסתכל, and I was not supposed to look at him. בו, ואמר לי, השתדל שלא תסתכל בפני בשעה שאני מתכוון בייחוד קריאת שמע, ובשעה שאני קורא במודים. He said, don't look at me when I'm doing קריאת שמע or modim. Maybe this could be a reason why they cover the face with a talit, those or the mechavenim, that for others, that if you don't look at the person while he's doing Kiryat Shema, I don't know why you would be looking. You're looking to see do it, but I'm saying he was looking for the purpose of education. You understand? And he says something interesting. He says, don't look at it, not in Kiryat Shema and not in the Modim. Also, don't look at me. When I mean look, I'm assuming the face, because I have no doubt that the Arizal was covered head to toe. So when he meant look, he meant literally at the panim, because like I said, I've known from Rabbi Yitzhak Kaduri and a few other Mikubalim I saw in Israel, they cover themselves completely. Or like Chamovadia would say on the Baba Sa'ali, it was tsanua. What do you mean tsanua? He covered himself more than a woman does, even completely, multiple places. And there's a lot of kedusha that comes from covering a person. There's a big kedusha and protection from covering a person. We'll go into that later. There's a whole thing, research I found online on Otzana Chochma about why a person should cover himself. And when he doesn't, he allows mazzikim and certain things to have access. There is something between covering and not having visibility, especially for men. I know for women, we say it's sanua, everything for men. The guy's walking around with a tank top and his wife's covered up. No, there's sanua also for the men. So he tells them, don't look at him when he's doing the Kiddusha and when he's doing Kadosh, 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 Hashem Tzebaot, Ki Elu Hagimel Mekamot Yesh Bahem Kavanot Nura'ot. So where did he say there's a lot of Kavanot? In Kiryat Shema, Modim, and Kiddusha. ועל ידי זה יוסר ממך כאב העיניים ונמנעתי ביום המחרת מלהסתכל בו בגימל זמנים אלו ותכף נרפאתי. He said, I stopped looking at the Arizal during those 3 times when he was having ultra strong kavanot, and he got better. His eyes got healed. So I hope and I wish we have gedolim like that today that can help advise us instead of trying to go around in circles. It'll tell you here, fix this one thing, and everything would just fall into place. All right, we are almost done with the introduction on the chok. I think the introduction is very important because as we're going to go in and learn the chok LeYisrael, we'll understand it. I found something too interesting yesterday I wanted to bring up to you. There were a few people that were tremendously successful in life that people know today, but their entire process was through failure. One of them was Abraham Lincoln. A lot of people are not well aware, I pulled this up yesterday, that he failed majorly 11 times before becoming the president of the United States, before freeing the slaves and all that stuff. Just quickly, from 1832, for 28 years he failed at different things. He lost his job for a state legislator. He failed in business. His sweetheart died. He had a nervous breakdown. He was defeated for becoming speaker. He was defeated for nomination of Congress. He lost his renomination. He was rejected for a land officer. He was defeated for U.S. Senate. He was defeated for nomination for vice president. He was again defeated for U.S. Senate, number 11. But number 12 was when he ran again in 1860 and he became elected president. And if there's something we could learn from, they say, if you didn't do the Yegi'ah, even if you did the Yegi'ah and you were not Motzeh, Yagata v'lo matzata al ta'amen, don't believe it. Continuing to work on a person's self through failure and through barriers is what is the Torah. That is the foundation of the Torah. That's what makes a Jew, is that no matter what, he keeps going further and further no matter what. I found something interesting on 6 other individuals who also were told that they were failures in their life and they were wrong, only that they became the ones who actually set the tone. Michael Jordan was cut from his high school basketball team. Walt Disney was fired from a newspaper because he was lacking imagination and having no original ideas. Mr. Walt Disney himself. Steve Jobs, at 30 years old, was devastated. He was thrown out of his company to do it. The Beatles was rejected on the recording studio. They were told that we don't like their sound and they have no future in show business. Albert Einstein wasn't able to speak until he was 4 years old, and that his teachers told him he would never amount to anything. So they told Albert Einstein. And Oprah Winfrey, the famous news anchor, I was told she wasn't fit for television. When we re-begin our second part, we'll talk about Allah Shalom Edmond J. Safra, who's Lebanese. My family's Lebanese. I'll give you an interesting story about him from Lebanon, about how they also told him he was going to be a failure, and he just ignored everyone and kept on working harder and succeeded. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen.